3, 2, 1, and we're on the air. So thank you, Rick, for setting this up, and thank you all for gathering. These are the question and answer on the Bridges of Meaning Discord server. We didn't do it last week. I was busy, so I canceled, and then I got sick, so it's a good thing we didn't have it set at all. But I'm fine, and which is an inside joke in my family, because before my father died in 2013, I called him the Sunday night before. I said, "How you doing, Dad?" He said, "I'm fine." And the next morning, he walked to meet somebody at a restaurant and died of a heart attack. So that's in our family. We don't say, "I'm fine." But so we're going to do some question and answers, and Sherry has volunteered to MC this morning. And well, let's get going. So go ahead, Sherry, take it away.
Okay, so the first question is from Simon Nelson. Oh, no, sorry, Ben Love. And it says, Paul Vanderklay, what are your thoughts on Tim Blackman's departure from Wheaton? After listening to today's Falwell video, there seem to be many applicable points, but if I'm not mistaken, you actually know him. As context, I'm a recent Wheaton grad who was friends with Tim. He started as the chaplain my freshman year, and we collaborated on a few things over the years.
Okay, so Tim Blackman is in fact a very good friend of mine. Tim was very good friends in seminary with my best man at my wedding, whose name is actually Calvin Friend. And so Calvin and Tim got to know each other. Tim went to the same church that I did and Calvin did in Grand Rapids, Madison Square Christian Reformed Church. All of us mentored under Dave Beelan. Madison Square is sort of a inner city, charismatic, Grand Rapids Christian Reformed Church. And then Tim came out to the Sacramento area to plant a church in Folsom in 1999. Tim and Betsy and Chuck Dillander. And so so the way the Sacramento cluster sort of rolled out is Kevin Adams was here first. He came in 91 to plant a church called Granite Springs. And then I came here in 97 after the Dominican Republic. And then Tim and Chuck came in 99. And then another friend of mine, Ron Vanderwell, came in 2000. And we sort of became a little cohort that started planting churches in the Sacramento area. Tim is a very interesting guy. His father was an African American who was growing up in the Jim Crow South, and Tim has a very interesting story about his father. His father was working as something like a bellhop or so at a hotel, and was helping a family with their luggage. And basically, he and the child were interacting. If I'm probably not remembering the story correctly, but basically, he got crap for, in the Jim Crow South for interacting with a white child. And so he left the United States and he moved to the Netherlands, where he found the racial environment better. And he married a Dutch woman, a white Dutch woman, and had 3 boys. And Tim, I believe, is the middle of the 3. I know his younger brother a little bit. I don't really know his older brother at all. And Tim grew up in the Netherlands, went to school. His father was a vocalist and a musician. And so part of Tim's skills are also music. And but then Tim went to college I think he went to a Bible college, maybe in France. Tim's an incredibly brilliant, urbane, sophisticated individual who then he went to Calvin Seminary and got his degree at the same seminary I got a degree at. And after Calvin Seminary, he's always been very much in demand. And there's a lot going on in that, but Tim's always had a lot of demands. People have wanted Tim for all kinds of things. He's, like I said, he's brilliant. He's articulate. He's extremely well read. Um, he's a musician. The guy can basically do it all. He's incredibly charismatic, incredibly personable, and so Tim planted a church in Folsom, and so we worked quite closely with Tim and met together regularly and did all sorts of fun things in New York and around here and did retreats. And so I know Tim quite well. And after, we were kind of heartbroken when Tim took the call to the church he grew up in the Netherlands, in The Hague, and he pastored that church for a number of years. And then he took the job at Wheaton. And Tim, people look at each other through these low resolution cartoons. And when a lot of evangelicals see Tim, they see someone who, he's got African American ancestry, but culturally, he's very European. And people don't appreciate exactly what all that means. Tim is also um, a very fun individual. Tim has a rather sarcastic sense of humor, and a lot of these American evangelical, rather prudish sensitivities, especially about jokes about race and sex, they don't really. Tim doesn't really follow those rules, and so when Tim went to Wheaton, I don't know a lot about Wheaton. I just know that growing up, there were sort of two frontline Christian colleges that many would consider, and there were Wheaton and Calvin. And the thing about Wheaton and Calvin was, if you went to Wheaton back in the day, you had to sign a pledge that had things like you wouldn't drink, you wouldn't smoke, you wouldn't go to movies. Calvin College was the opposite. Calvin College, while it was a dry campus, Calvin didn't make you go to chapel. Calvin didn't make you go to church. If you wanted to go to a Christian college and be a pagan, Calvin didn't stand in your way. There were some community standards in terms of behavior, but for the most part, you were at liberty to do as you pleased. And so when Tim went to Wheaton, Tim is also quite theologically conservative. And people don't recognize that about Tim because Tim is extraordinarily well read. He reads voraciously. He reads all over the map. He can talk about, incredibly esoteric, theological, philosophical ideas at the drop of a hat. I mean, he's just a brilliant guy. But he's got a quirky sense of humor. And so when Tim talked to me to tell me he was no longer working at Wheaton, he got basically fired because of a Title IX investigation. It didn't surprise me a bit because I know Tim. And just in some of the same ways, certain evangelicals get annoyed by me because I can be a little bit irreverent and open. Tim is the same way. And so when Tim told me these stories that got written up under, as his Title IX, about him creating an unsafe environment, number one, all of these incidences happened early on in Tim's time there. He had been a church planter in Folsom. He had been living in the Netherlands in an extremely non-uptight, cosmopolitan, yet deeply conservative. That's again the thing that people don't understand about Tim. He is very conservative, and he's in some ways Jonathan Peugeot conservative. He's a Protestant. He's a Protestant, big R Reformed neo-trad in some ways. This is a guy who likes going to John Piper conferences. And so when Tim told me what happened, I thought, and I don't know anything, but I thought Tim was too conservative for some people there. And there's been, at least to my knowledge, absolutely zero accusation of any any real sexual or racial impropriety, someone didn't want him there. And they, Title IX is sort of a way to play fast and loose with getting rid of someone. And that's what happened. Now, how this is going to all sort out, I don't know. I suspect Wheaton is going to, at some point, lament what they did to Tim. And truth be told, I think at least a few months ago, if Wheaton had said, no, we're sorry, we want you back, Tim would have come back. But actually, and so the question in terms of the Jerry Falwell Jr. issue, I'm not surprised that in a low resolution media way, people look at these two issues and say, yeah, well, where there's smoke, there's fire. A lot of people are going to think that. Could that be? Well, it could be with respect to anyone. I've been a pastor far too long to completely appreciate the fact that none of us see into each other's dark places and hearts, and we all have them. But do I think Tim Blackman is a sexual predator? No. Do I think Tim Blackman created unsafe spaces for people other than rather prudish evangelicals? No. Do I think Tim Blackman can sometimes be a little cavalier and maybe inappropriate with some of his humor? Yeah, I've seen that too. But to rush him out the door like they did, I think at some point Wheaton is going to recognize the error of their ways, because to my knowledge, they have offered zero evidence that Tim has actually done anything worth firing. And so I'm totally in Tim's corner. But I watched this play out on the internet, and the problem with trial by mob, trial by Twitter mob, trial by blogosphere is that everybody is looking at everything in terms of low resolution, and there are no good rules of evidence. And so, yeah, this is where you tend to get injustice happen. And it's a sad story. I think Tim will be fine. If I had an extra $100,000 of budget at Living Stones, I would be the first person to try to hire Tim. I'd probably need $200,000 worth of budget, because Tim is that smart, that well-read, that good-looking, that charismatic, that sharp. And what Tim would really love to do is what Tim always loves to do, which is read lots of books and write and preach. I was surprised when he took the job at Wheaton, because he's not really, some pastors love doing pastoral care. Some pastors don't. Tim's not a pastoral care guy. When he planted his church, he had Chuck Dillender, who was a consummate Christian formation expert. And Chuck Dillender continues to be a pastor in my classes here. He just moved to a different church. But no, if anybody out there wants to hire Tim, I would say get him while he's available, because I wouldn't for a moment not hire Tim. And I would in a heartbeat hire Tim at Living Stones. And Tim could, Wheaton was stupid. They were just stupid. I don't know what kind of crazy political games are going on there, but no, Tim Blackman's the real deal. And to let someone of that caliber go is just crazy. And so Wheaton's lost. And I don't know what rumors are around, but I frankly don't care. I know Tim, and that's how I feel about Tim. I don't know if Ben's in the comments, if he has any, or anybody else has any follow-ups with that.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if you could explain what Title IX is for me.
Oh yeah. Okay. So Title IX was a piece of legislation that happened that basically said, so what was happening in American universities, this is my understanding of it, which by no means is voluminous. Title IX basically said that colleges needed to spend as much on women's sports as men's sports. And so colleges, big universities are making unbelievable amounts of money on college football, college basketball. I mean, these are huge industries in the United States. Women's sports at college were basically starving. And so if you want to be included in the American student aid program, your college has to meet certain recommendations, one of which is Title IX. Now, Title IX has come to be a far more broadly applied legislation about sex. And so there was, with accusations of rape on campus, there was a lot going on as to very basically it's about whether men and women are treated equally on campus, equity. And so Title IX has become a big point of equity. And so Title IX, you can remove someone under Title IX for creating, again, a hostile work environment. The thing, if you look at, and you can do plenty of this reading is on the internet now. The person that the person who supposedly was offended, a lot of the people who supposedly were offended by Tim have basically come up and said, number one, we understood Tim's sense of humor. Number two, we weren't offended. Number three, you're crazy to fire him. So someone wanted Tim gone. That's my read. And again, I know nothing. But why would a college let a guy like Tim go? I don't understand. But Title IX, if you Google Title IX is big into this whole Jordan Peterson corner and the culture war aspect of this conversation. So basically, if you're a there's so much on the internet about this, but that's what Title IX is about. So yeah, the charge was that Tim created and you can go and find articles written about this. Julie Roy has some of them, articles written about Wheaton and Tim, and the charges against him are laid out. And I very much understand people who don't know Tim or know anything reading those charges and say, well, it's sort of like Jerry Falwell Jr. when he's lifting weights with his pelvis and taking pictures of the woman with his pants zipped, where there's smoke, there's fire. And well, often when there's smoke, there's fire. But sometimes, the kind of regular smoke Tim usually gives off. And I don't really think in this case there's a deep, dark secret that's being hidden. I see this as just Tim being Tim. And I see it as 3-4 years ago. I mean, if Tim was a predator, they would have a lot more evidence that, usually these things, once they get going, people come out of the woodwork and the accusations continue to mount. We haven't seen any of that. And so I don't know why they had to reach back 3 years for incidences, which to me clearly seemed like perhaps some unwise joking and Tim not understanding a rather uptight evangelical, rather prudish context of Wheaton. And again, I don't know Wheaton, but this is just my imagination, my low resolution imagination projecting into it. But that's my guess. That's my guess. So I'm definitely on Team Tim, and I think some smart organization. I told Tim he shouldn't join any organization. I told Tim he should just go full YouTube, be a celebrity pastor, because that's what I think Tim could do a lot of service if he would devote himself to writing and reading and speaking. And I think he could do really well on YouTube. But I think Tim's kids are younger than mine, and so he's got a lot of college bills looking out ahead of him. And so I think he wants kind of a corporate platform to work upon. And I know that some rather serious people are talking to him. So anybody that grabs up Tim Blackman fast is smart. So there's my answer.
Thanks, Paul. Does anybody Have any thoughts or an unrelated question for Paul?
Somewhat related question, Paul.
Yep.
It seems that kind of connected to Wheaton College, that a lot of Christian universities are really struggling, including even the leading and most famous ones like Wheaton or Calvin, and struggling in many ways, whether it's financial, attracting as talented students as they used to expect, sort of ideological and mission drift, and those sorts of things. And I was wondering if you had any sort of thoughts on the state of Christian higher education, and kind of maybe things that you wish it were doing that it weren't.
That's a really good question. I'm not particularly close to it. Christian higher education is some of the best institutions of Christian higher education have deeply estuary qualities between the secular university and, let's say, one pole is the American secular university system and the other pole is American fundamentalism. There's always been an aspect of evangelicalism where they're attempting to mediate and negotiate the disenchantment without giving up on it. You find that in the neo-evangelicals in the middle of the 20th century, Billy Graham, the founding of Fuller. I just finished last night listening to Paul and Leitner's conversation with Andrew Root on Paul's podcast, which I thought was excellent, and I want to do some commenting on that. I think Andrew Root has done the church a real service in his treatment of Charles Taylor and secularism. Andrew Root is is further over on the mainline end of the spectrum, but doesn't seem to be on the extreme mainline end of the spectrum. Paul Ann Leitner is a evangelical, charismatic, but I've done a couple of conversations with him. So right now, North American Christians, churches, and institutions are negotiating these waters. The rise of and the power of this, however we want to label it, the critical theory, postmodern. I mean, this wave that has dominated higher education and the universities. Of course, Jordan Peterson is right in the middle of this fight, or was. That has impacted Christian colleges too, as has the fact that the American civil rights movement in the middle and end of the 20th century became, in the American symbolic religious imaginary, sort of the gold standard of a religiosity that could be embraced quite broadly. And critical theory in its various manifestations have managed to leverage that moral status, and that's part of what John McWhorter says it really well. There's a lot of sociology in this, but people, and this includes academics and Christian colleges, they live in terror of being called a racist. Now, of course, if you're a black academic, it's a little harder to stick that on you. But for a lot of white, evangelical, moderate academics, they live in fear of being called racists. Now, I'm going to say some things here that are probably shooting from the hip. There are a lot of academics that are frankly cowards. And Jordan Peterson is not one of them. And neither is John Vervaeke. But there are a lot of academics that feel that are trying to climb a status hierarchy. They're looking for Colin Wright is not one either. They're looking for it's a brutal marketplace out there, and they're looking for tenure, they're looking for career stability, they're looking for possibility of growth in their paycheck, and everybody knows right now that to be associated with the Republican Party or Jordan Peterson or perhaps in some ways Paul Vanderklay is not going to do your career any good. Now, I'm a moderate when it comes to a lot of these things, and I can really appreciate some of what postmodern theory and even critical theory can teach us about the subtle dynamics of race and communities. That really isn't my area of critique. My area of critique is in their imagined prescriptions to solve these things and their ambition about what in fact can be solved by them. And when I listened to Jordan Peterson's critique in his better days, that's what I heard clearly. I mean, the problem with critical race theory, frankly, isn't that they overemphasize race. It's that they don't appreciate the subtleties that even race, that is even going on with race, because it's not a unidimensional polarity. It's multidimensional. And so the intersectionality people have a point too. Now, all of this has bled onto Christian colleges. And there are many ways it's not that Christian colleges are immune to the overall status economics in the culture. In many ways, up and coming academics in Christian colleges probably see their Christian colleges or universities as the minor leagues, and they'd really like to go to Stanford or Berkeley or Harvard or Yale or maybe Notre Dame. So there are pecking orders here too. And so, I look at someone like Daniel Bonavac, who is teaching at University of Texas in Austin. And, he's an outlier like Jordan Peterson. I have a lot of respect for these people. Even if I might disagree on this or that with them, hey, there's an academic with guts. There's an academic with courage. You know what? I when I see that, I pay attention. Tim Blackman's a guy like that too. Tim is charismatic as you can find, but Tim is also going to tell you the truth. and that's what makes him such a good preacher, but it's also what makes it difficult to live in a place, in an institution, because institutions take on their own cultures, and people who are lone agreeableness buck those cultures. And so conservative Christian universities are really on the horns of a bunch of things. The Christian Reformed Church, by virtue of what a particular congregation in Grand Rapids has done over the last couple of weeks, is about to descend into warfare over LGBT stuff. And a place like Calvin College is caught right in the middle of that. Calvin College, unlike Dordt College, unlike Trinity College, Dordt University, Trinity, everybody's calling themselves universities now. Unlike Dordt and Trinity or King's, Calvin College is actually owned by the Christian Reformed Church. To be a professor at Calvin College, you have to sign a form of the Covenant of Office Bearers, which is a version of something that I, as a minister, have to sign. And so I know that there are academics at Calvin College that would love nothing better than to see the college to be much more affirming in terms of LGBTQ things. If you look at Mary Hulst, she's really tried to walk a line there, and I really give her credit for working that very difficult middle space. I give her credit because I often work that very difficult middle space. I think that's really what the church has to in many ways. But to do so in an academic context is really, really tough. And so all of these issues all of these issues that moderate people sort of find themselves in the middle of, they're really hurting in those issues. And so I don't know anything about Wheaton. Wheaton has tied itself in some ways to Billy Graham and C.S. Lewis, but I would imagine many of the same. Wheaton tends to get caught in some things that Calvin hasn't been caught in as badly. Although, if you know the details at Calvin College, you know that there are plenty of tensions going on in that way too. The Christian Reformed Church is a strange place because it's got aspects of the church that aspire to be mainline. It's got aspects of the church that aspire to be young, restless, and reformed. It's got aspects of the church that want to maintain the Dutch Reformed heritage. It's got aspects of the church that are really enamored with the Anglicans and the Orthodox and the Roman Catholics. So because it's a church whose formation is sort of separatist, Dutch Calvinist, immigrant, they're sort of all over the map. And Calvin College has to navigate those tensions. So no, it's an extraordinarily difficult time for Christian colleges, partly because, okay, so throw Title IX into the mix. It is probably not unreasonable to imagine that if the Democrats recapture the White House and the and cabinet positions of education and justice, that the American government will tell Christian colleges, unless you demonstrate your full affirming LGBT credentials, we're going to kick you out of the student aid programs. At the same time, a school like Calvin College, which even back in the 80s when I attended, was 90% plus Christian Reformed students who grew up in the Christian Reformed Church. Now that is less than 50%. And the Christian Reformed Church itself is far more diverse. What this means is that institutionally, for Calvin College to survive, they have to tack right more towards conservative evangelicals and fundamentalists, because that's their market share. Because if you're a progressive evangelical or a deconstructed evangelical, you're going to go to secular university or to a Christian college that is affirming. So that's what Calvin colleges may have to deal with in the next couple of years. Wheaton as well, Liberty as well, and so this is not the majority program that Calvin College got its name for, with Alvin Plantinga and Nicholas Waltersdorf and Richard Mao. Calvin College was, in a strange way, working a Dutch Reformed neo-evangelical track, which tried to both have solid Christian, small O Orthodox credentials and respectable academics in the world. Wheaton's been trying to work the same middle area. And so these places in particular are really going to feel the pinch. A place like Liberty University, they're much more fundamentalist. They've obviously got their own issues right now they're working through. But the more, say, a place like Liberty University wants to aspire to be more like a Calvin College or Wheaton, the more those cross pressures in the culture are going to impact them. Liberty University also has a ton of money, but that kind of money comes with strings attached. And often the money has a conservative demand. So now what happened with Tim at Wheaton, the pressures on Calvin College, it's going to be rough waters for those places, because in almost anything they do, they're not going to be able to win easily. And so, yeah, it's the difficulty of being in the middle. So in a sense, it's always been easier if you just say evolution is bunk, and tack to the right in terms of some of these boundary markers. It's a little bit easier, except that in some ways, then you've sort of got the dynamics of Donald Trump trying to get reelected. You play to the base, but if your base is overall shrinking, you're sort of moving into a corner. And these people are all very smart, and they know this, and they got a tough space to work. So yeah, it's a great question.
Thanks,
Okay.
Paul.
I'm just going to go to the next question.
Yep.
It's from Ben K. And the question is, I know you try to stay out of politics. I don't think this question pulls you too far into the weeds. Just curious what your thoughts are on the appropriate role the church should play in affecting policy. For example, I speak often with a few friends, some that are staunchly pro-life and others that are pro-reparation. I don't necessarily put these issues on equal footings, but see them as representative of large factions within the church. I tend to be more averse to politics because I see meaningful work that can be done outside the political sphere. But especially in an election year, it feels like many see an opportunity to be righteous or sinful in one's voting decisions and project those expectations onto other Christians. Do you think there are imperatives on the church to influence policy? Does that imperative increase as Christians make up a greater percentage of a nation's population? How do you tend to respond to the instinct for so many to see their own party's platform as the Christian platform?
That's a great question. Everybody has political ideas. And I think part of the genius of America is to create an atmosphere of tolerance towards people's political ideas. If you want to give money to the Communist Party, if you want to give money to the Nazi Party, if you want to give money to the Republican Party, if you want to give money to the Democratic Party, go right ahead. Now, religion and politics, as I've said before, I think a good way to think about how they relate is the now and the always. Because in some ways, so lately my videos have been thinking a lot about what I'm trying to find the language for, the symbolic, dramatic, liturgical, imaginary. So there's an aspect of that that's political, an aspect of that that's religious. Now, when we talk about the church, I think it's helpful to differentiate between, and I'll show my Protestantism here, the institutional church and the organic church. And I will also show my formation in Kuyperian Dutch Calvinism. I don't think my particular denomination should be tremendously vocal in terms of specific political prescriptions. As a minister, I had one of my former elders say the other day, yeah, whenever Paul talks about politics, and you see my rough drafts, I'd mention politics. I use politics a lot as illustrations. I think you have to. I don't know where Paul stands in terms of politics. And I thought, well, that's if he doesn't quite know where I stand, then I'm doing things okay. Because it's very much my intention to not use a pulpit as a political platform. I think those two things need to be separate, because I think the church is always keeping the longer view of always. But Christians are citizens, and they have a duty and a right to be involved in a political process. And so in that sense, I think the institutional church should be very careful about wading into partisan politics. But I think Christians as individuals should feel free to participate in that sphere. Now, because I have a position in a church, because political donations are public, I don't donate to any political party. Anybody who listens to me long enough will probably get some idea about where I stand with respect to things, but I will tell you right now, I do not intend to vote for either of the candidates of the two major parties this year. Politics we can't avoid. It's part of the water that we swim in. Reparations. Part of the struggle that we deal with is that these words are charged, and they of course have meaning, but sometimes words get so deeply, can use Charles Taylor's language, words get so deeply cross-pressured, their utility is significantly reduced. And so it's exactly what happens with the word Messiah when in the Gospels. It's why Jesus avoids coming out and say, yeah, Messiah, that's me. It's because once he uses that word, everybody assumes the meaning of that word. You can say the same about pro-life. You can say the same about pro-reparations. As individuals, each of us acts politically every day. And I think Jordan Peterson's exactly right that look at how we act more than look at what we say. Well, we're getting stuttering, Rick. Poor Rick. He's smiling. I can see Rick now. This is such a good question, such a hard question. It deserves. So let me map out for you the tradition in which I was formed, which is sort of the Dutch Calvinist Kuyperian tradition. By virtue of society, we need to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. And so each of us, by virtue of the roles that we have to play, should modulate and limit what we talk about when and where. So I'm not going to tell my congregation who to vote for. I think any church that is dominated by one political party in the United States or perhaps one political party in Canada, and I know that in Canada and the UK and Australia, you don't have just a two-party system. You have a multiple-party parliamentary system. Any church organization that is dominated by one party or the other, I think is running the risk of being captured. And that's a huge problem for the church. The church in some ways should always be above this because the church is dealing with always and not simply now. And that way, and again, I think we see Jesus do that perfectly. You can't help but see Jesus both talking politics, often in very cryptic terms. Birds have perches, foxes have holes. Well, what were the birds? They were the eagles on top of Roman standards. What were the holes? They were Herod's palace all over the place. Give to Caesar what is Caesar and give to God what is God's. I mean, you can't imagine a more crafty answer to a very difficult statement in a very hot and bloody culture war. And I think Christians today need to regain that capacity that Jesus showed in the Gospels. And that's why I said on Peter Lindbergh's show, I said, I think culture wars are great times for Christians. We might get killed a lot or isolated or ostracized or kicked out, but Christian war dynamics are exactly where Jesus showed his supremacy and some of his excellencies in the Gospels. And I think we as Christians need to look at Jesus and study Jesus carefully in terms of how to navigate those waters. Study Jesus more than we study Elijah. Study Jesus more than we study Amos. Jesus is the master and a clearer revelation of how to navigate a culture war. Does that mean there isn't room for the prophetic? No. If you watch my last video about the secular, if you understand the unique nature of Hebrew prophecy, Jesus both embodies, Jesus is prophet, priest, and king. He embodies all three. The prophets embody the prophetic aspect. The priests embody theirs. The king embodies theirs. But in Jesus, all three come together. And now that we are citizens, we embody the kingly aspect. In the church, we have to embody the prophetic, but we also embody the priestly and we embody the kingly. So again, I think we need to look at Jesus as our example. And so I recommend that Christians read the Gospels deeply and study the dynamics of that particular culture war in the middle of Second Temple Judaism deeply and understand how Jesus navigates those waters. You know, N.T. Wright is correct in interpreting the ek. Jesus does not say, my kingdom is of this world. Jesus says, my kingdom is not from this world. Well, what does he mean? My kingdom is from heaven. Well, what does that mean? Well, and how does that intersect with the politics we have today? So if I were a Christian politician, I would be playing this game differently than I do now because I'm a pastor. But I think every Christian needs to learn from the prophet, priest, and king dynamic and navigate those three, let's call them archetypes, navigate those three archetypes as we navigate these spheres now. So if you are a church, an organized church, and a minister, someone who has a role to play, an officer of an organized church, you're going to play that role differently than if you're a Christian candidate. And I respect Christian candidates that are Democrats and Republicans. And I see them as trying to work this very difficult matrix. And in this way, the Kuyperian vision of Christian colleges is that you would have Christians teaching political science, and you have Christians teaching history, and you have Christians teaching biology, and all of these things. And so, yeah, is it imperative on the church to influence policy? I'd say it's imperative on Christians to influence policy. How the church gets into that at this time and place, boy, my admonition in the Christian Reformed Church would be steer clear of partisan politics as much as possible. Does that mean that the church is uninterested in abortion policy or immigration policy or policy that has to do with race or childhood or euthanasia? No, I don't think the church is uninterested in it, but I think the role of the church is to form Christians not simply in terms of the specific application of those particular now policy issues, but in terms of the deeper Christian formation of Christ so that we ourselves can operate in this conflicted partisan atmosphere as Jesus did. Because finally, we are pointing to a far larger and bigger story than just the particular political atmosphere and policy of today. And again, the now is incredibly important. The now is always with us, but the always is bigger and more important. The always shapes the now, and the succession of now shape the always. But always is far, far larger. And so Christians should influence policy, and churches should help Christians be better policy influencers, but churches should also be deeply non-tyrannical. Jesus is king, but the church should be non-tyrannical, and in that way also express the aspect of Jesus that is anti-tyrannical. And again, when we see Jesus in the gospel, that's what we see. Jesus is a Dallas Willard, that you will not find any human being more adroit in any of this than Jesus. Well, you say, well, I read the Gospels and I don't see that. Well, maybe it's because you're not, it's partly because the church has not done a good job in navigating this herself and bearing witness to this herself. And so my admonition is study Jesus and study the politics of Jesus. Now, the politics of the politics of Jesus will go far beyond just respect for life and respect for authority, but will go into the far longer term politics of Jesus in terms of how to negotiate a violent, difficult culture war? So it's a great question.
I have a couple thoughts. When you were saying to steer clear of partisan politics, I was thinking to myself, how in heaven's name do you do that in the political climate that we find ourselves in? It seems that if you take any kind of position, you're on either side of it, in essence. And so I'm wondering, is this almost like a return to early Christianity? You know, like you think about the early Christians and the political, how inhospitable the politics of the day were towards Christianity, and how did they live out their Christianity? I don't know. It's an observation and a question, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think, again, all of us, every Christian will have politics. And, depending again on if you're a Christian minister or a priest, well, you're going to have to be a little careful about that. If you work in a school, you're probably going to have to be a little careful about that. It's going to be difficult to navigate, but if you're a citizen, it's your right, and in fact your calling, to participate in the political process. But why doesn't Jesus lose his ever-loving mind? And I mean ever-loving 100%. His ever-loving mind over the sex life of Tiberius Caesar. And why don't we find Peter and Paul using their platforms to denounce Nero? I mean, look into the lives of the god emperors of the day, and look at how look at what they're doing. Well, it's very clear that Jesus and Peter and Paul are certainly not captured by the news cycle or by the political atmosphere. And Jesus, I think, Paul and Peter don't do as much with it, even though all three are killed by it. They know how to navigate, and we don't. So yeah, Christians are going to have to figure out, each of us. They weren't living in democracies either. They didn't get to vote for the next Caesar. They didn't have any political voice at all. So if you don't have a political voice, why talk about it? We do. We're citizens. There's democracy. We get to go and vote. We get to influence our neighbors on Facebook. Yada yada yada. So have a political aspect, negotiate it, but keep it in perspective. And I think when your politics becomes your religion, you've been captured by a certain spirit, and you're in danger of being possessed. So, and in some ways, to the degree that Ben Shapiro and Eric Weinstein are friends, well, that tells me a lot about both of them, because they're coming at it from different angles. So have your politics, but if you can only be friends with people who have the same politics as you've got a problem. Because then in a sense, politics has become your religion, and it's a bad religion. And if you can only tolerate people who think like you in a narrow political bandwidth, you've got a real problem. And you're going to need an exorcist, hopefully, to deliver you from the spirits that are controlling your heart and mind. I don't know if that helps you at all, Sherry.
Yeah. Yeah, I thank you. That was helpful. I'm just wondering if anybody else has anything to add to this. Pretty loaded.
I could use your help while you're on this subject. This is Joe. If I could map this onto your use of the word emergent versus, I think it's eminent or imminent, I'm not sure.
Emanation. Emanation from above, emergence from below.
Yeah, so a lot of the mode I'm accustomed to operating in, I think it's prevalent in the culture several centuries, is this emergent mode. It's reminiscent of and well elaborated, I think, with Hegel and this material dialectic, which could emerge even into a metaphysical dialectic. And I hear notes of that with Vervaeke's Dialogos. And the manner in which you talk about politics is the now and religion is the always. I find myself, deeply sensing the importance of what I think you mean by the immanence, sort of the authority of the revelatory, something that enters into the frame from outside the frame, versus the emergent dialectic, dialogos, that involves, bringing our best practices to bear through constant measures and iterations and reiterations, and little by little we can come to approximate the shape of the logos that sits inherent in the frame, in the material world. And along those lines, I get mesmerized, and in the way that you go to Lewis, I'm going to you and saying, hey, I need some psychological hygiene. Awake in me again some clarity around and justification or defense of the eminent, because I think the way you describe Christ is that he's both extraordinary in the emergent sense of his finesse with respect to the political circumstance, and he's profoundly eminent, and I think in a way that when we see it, we say, well, we can't be ourselves, we can't move forward without that eminence. But that's way more vague to me than the emergent stuff.
Yeah. The when you get to talking with Peugeot and Vervaeke about eminence and emergence, again, probably the easiest way to think about it is emanation from above and emerging from below. Emergence is sort of a Darwinian assumption that there doesn't need to be any emanation. It can all just be from below. But the problem with that is that there's nothing from below to begin with. And so and where this begins to factor in is that, well, there are these givens that emergence is reliant upon, that often the emergent is unwitting. It doesn't know the givenness that it is relying upon. And so when Jesus comes in from above, and again, the Gospel of John, he's born from above. No one can see the kingdom of heaven unless they're born from above. I think the emergence was no. It's pretty clear in John 3. Jesus is saying above that, and the in the book of Revelation, the new heavens and the new earth, they come down from heaven.
But if, as John says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was made flesh, and then all of creation in and through the Word, can't you fairly say that the pattern of creation is an analog of Christ himself? So grace builds on nature, and there's an entirely legitimate mode of access to the Logos vis-a-vis an emergent phenomena in creation.
I look at it more in terms of Genesis 1 is very interesting because there's the there's the tohu wavohu, and the logos comes down and draws productive creation out of the tohu wavohu. And someone might ask, well, which came first, the logos or the chaos? And a Christian answer is, of course, God is first. I think, and again, I reveal myself to be a Christian. I think the emanation from heaven gives structure to the chaotic emergence, and the emergence only continues to be productive and doesn't dead end itself because of the logos from heaven.
So that casts an awful lot of shade on the last 400 or 500 years of contemplation or meditation on creation as being a source of it.
Well, creation for us is a source of revelation, because holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. That's eminence. The whole earth is full of his glory. In Genesis 1, let the earth bring forth. I mean, right there in that phrase, let the earth bring forth, you have this Vervakian both and. God doesn't parachute cows down from heaven. Let the earth bring forth. God does, lo, he abhors not the virgin's womb. And this is what the Christian God does. So it's definitely not Gnostic. It's not Docetic. It doesn't despise materiality. It matter becomes what matter always should be, which is the instantiation of the logos. And the fact that Jesus didn't float down from heaven in a golden parachute, but enters into the virgin womb and Mary is the mother of God in a strange way. Is its incarnation. I mean, that Christianity at a higher resolution than I think anything else does. Christianity sets it all there. And so Jesus bears our flesh, and Jesus now bears the new flesh that each of us will have in the resurrection. And so it's the ultimate in both and. I hope we're connecting. I hope we're not talking past each other.
Well, I'm trying to follow you from my, deliberately from my, in kinship with my secular, Christ-haunted agnostic, and immersed in an emergent mode. And even the way you say, I think you used the word to call forth, has all these emergent tones to it.
Yes.
And in that sense, it's not landing. There's something that needs to jar me to say that what the manner I'm going about it is insufficient, and then there's an authority in the revelation that I have to pay attention.
It's sort of, I think about George Jetson's suitcase car. I mean, he's got this, if you remember that old cartoon, he walks around with, Jetsons had all these gadgets that, a suitcase would become a car and they'd fly off in it or something like that. Well, the suitcase the car is in potential in the little suitcase or in the briefcase. And you just have to ask, this is part of the weakness of the blind Darwinian position, gosh, how on earth did we get so lucky that the constants are exactly how they should be? That we have this astounding life around us. I mean, and listening to I've been listening to a bunch of David Sloan Wilson lately too. Um, at some point, you just have to say, how these human beings that we are, where yeah, we're the stuff of Earth that we share with the animals, but these capacities that we have in the symbolic, dramatic, liturgical, imaginary. I mean, there's nothing like us in the world. Where on earth did we come from? What? How? Well, billions and billions. But you listen to a guy like James Tour who says, you know, I go to these conferences and people are all walking around acting like we know where life comes from. And he's just running around being a good evangelical. He won't say bullshit, but he's just running around saying, you guys are full of shit. We have no idea. We can't reproduce it, even if we're trying to reverse engineer it. The world is just way too astounding. Christians have the problem of evil, but you know, atheist Darwinians have the problem of good. There's just not enough time in 16 billion years to account for this without it having been built into George Jetson's suitcase. So I hear you. I hear you, Joe, in terms of you're struggling with the other side, and the power of these just so stories seem evident. But then when I feel that way, I modulate who I'm listening to, and whereas James Tour might frustrate me on some levels in terms of his videos, but if you listen to him, and this guy's just a world class he's just a world class scientist in terms of what he does, and he goes to these conferences and he says, we have no idea. We can't even define life, and we have no idea. We can't replicate it unless we cheat. And even then, we're far, far from it. And so we walk around imagining that, oh, life just emerged out of these, volcanic vents or mud pots, and he's like, no, it's simply not credible. And so let's stop lying to each other and acting like we know. I mean, and that's the truth on the scientific side, the emergent side. How on earth are we so fortunate to have a car fold out of a briefcase? And when I think that, it both on one hand fills with hope that, well, maybe I'm not crazy to believe in God. On the other hand, it can fill with terror that, well, gosh, Eric Weinstein's comment, once you imagine that there's a consciousness that sees you at the center of the universe, now you have to worry about what he thinks.
Thank
All
you.
right.
I appreciate that. We
Yep.
probably move on.
Yep.
Okay, well, yeah, like I said, there's a lot to think about there, but let's go to the next question. It's from Kalepa. With official churches being closed due to COVID, I've seen many responses ranging from worry to annoyance to helplessness to nihilistic despair to zealotry. This context being apart from churches facing the potential of not being able to survive this financially, as that could be a whole randomizing topic. The context in mind, shouldn't intentional koinonia be bearing most of that burden and allowing the body to get through, potentially even thriving through this compared to everyone else? I'm thinking of Egypt during Joseph's day, or even somewhat the apostles in prison, though that comes down to joy, still similar. Furthermore, mostly for the US, could this not be a perfect opportunity to reprioritize and be intentional about fellowship and local immediate community, especially as this has been a pretty profound negligence failure of ours in recent decades, at least in my opinion?
Yeah, it's a great question. The reality of churches right now is that it's far more. We have a big problem in our culture in that we watch the news. We watch highly centralized news that imagines it portrays reality back to us. In my experience right now, um, churches are all over the map here, even here in rather locked down California. Some churches are meeting outside, and when the air got bad, some churches were meeting inside. Um, we've now been living with COVID for a number of months, and most people have sort of figured out some routine of mask wearing and social distancing and hygiene and some of these kinds of things. So I think the the threat of I think most of us have some idea of how to do what we need to do with a degree of safety. So I think churches have to, and they in fact are, figuring out how they can operate and continue to operate. And that might mean more online stuff. That might mean cheating. That might mean defying. That might mean Zoom. That means a whole lot of different things. But you're very right in that the longer this goes, the more risks we're going to have to take in some ways with people. And I bought a car a couple of weekends ago, and I spent a fair amount of time sitting in a car dealership surrounded by all kinds of strangers. And so then when I came down with a fever later on that week, I thought, oh crap, I caught COVID at the car dealership. There's a possibility. Well, we're risking exposure with cars and with offices and with grocery buying and with all kinds of things, and we can do some risk at church. We just have to figure out how to do it safely. And again, in terms of the pastors that I talk to and the churches that I talk to, there's a lot of that going on. And so even though and most of them aren't taking the governor of the state of California to court over it. And again, I don't really have a problem with those that are doing that either. It challenged the law. I mean, it's times like this that we continue to work out the law. So, but each pastor and each church has to figure out what they need to do to both continue the work of the church and do so within the realities of the dangers of COVID contamination and distribution. So figure that out. And I also agree with you that it's a good time for churches to get experimental and to find new ways to be church with each other. So I think this is certainly a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. And churches are working that matrix, and they really are. They really are. And so don't believe what you see on TV. Not that what's on TV is wrong or lying. It's just a very low resolution, managed, shaped portrayal of the world towards all speech is motivated, including media speech. And all speech has a degree of propaganda, especially mass communication and social media. So, what's going on in churches right now is very complex. And it isn't, so what we're doing at Living Stones is what we're doing. The church across the street, they've been inside for the last few weeks. Churches that I know down in the valley, they've been working the inside outside thing. And generally speaking, a lot of the members of the church are self modulating. Those who are more anxious are staying at home, watching online. Those who aren't anxious at all, and in some cases, probably not anxious enough, they're showing up and they're doing stuff and they're getting together. So it's a lot more complex than what you read on the news.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Does anybody have a question for Paul?
Just as a follow-up to that, does that say something about where we are as a Christian culture if we're willing to, on the one hand, say God is the only top-down authority, and yet we won't fight against state mandates that seem like they're overboard. Like, I can't speak for my state because I don't think anything that we've done so far is overboard, but looking at other states, I'm like, that seems pretty heavy-handed, and why aren't people fighting back against that?
There's a certain efficiency in setting up contrasts, such as God versus other authorities. God's authority is mediated. God's authority is mediated by the church. God's authority is mediated by the state. God's authority is mediated by communities of people. The situation is far more complex than just a simple church versus state dynamic. And again, I'm not criticizing MacArthur or other Christians who are seeing it in this way and challenging them in court. I think that's a good thing. Go ahead and, I mean, a country this big can walk and chew gum at the same time. Go ahead and challenge it in court. But I'd say at the same time, have some awareness and agency and responsibility in terms of what you're actually doing in church. Many churches are not following the letter of the law with respect to these shutdowns. How do I know that? I drive by, I pay attention. You know, there's plenty of meetings going on in churches. There's plenty of small groups happening. There's plenty of stuff happening. And the government, you know, I talked to a pastor in another city in California, and they're a much larger church than Little Living Stones, and they basically told the chief of police, we're going to be meeting, and the chief of police said, that's fine. You know, I'm not going to stop you. I'm not going to go in and arrest you. So when we see it on the news, it's all in these black and white, you know, dualities. Oh, Gavin Newsom is shutting down the church in California. Hardly. Am I happy with how the state of California has managed this crisis? No. But have churches just sort of fallen in line? Some have. I've seen churches do, when it comes right down to cities and counties and specific instances, there's almost always a lot more common sense that's happening on the ground than what you would be led to believe in these stark contrasts. If the state, I'm actually more worried about the government via Title IX pulling financial aid away from Christian colleges because of issues of sexuality. I'm more concerned about that kind of those kinds of infringements on religious liberty than I am on COVID shutdowns in churches. Because even if the county just lifts the order, a lot of my people aren't coming because they're concerned about the virus. So I think too often Christians set up these contrasts in order to sort of show it as a fight. And again, I look at the savvy. I mean, people kept trying to put Jesus on the horns of these things. Should we pay taxes to Caesar? What does Jesus do? He's so crafty with it. I mean, when Jesus wants to set up a highly contrastive thing to make a point, well, he does it better than anyone. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Oh gosh. If your eye causes you to sin, gouge it out. If you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, be up, get up, and throw yourself into the sea. Oh, Jesus can set up a contrast. Jesus Should we pay taxes to Caesar? Show me a coin. Whose picture's on it? Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Give to God what is God's. Jesus knew how to sidestep a political gotcha better than Jordan Peterson with Kathy Newman. He did. And we've been marveling and pondering those answers for years. So again, in a culture war like this, in a time of COVID like this, let's learn from our master. And, you know, at one point up in the Galilee, people want to make Jesus king. What does he do? He kind of slithers through the crowd somehow. How does he do that? You know, at other times, Jesus shows up in the synagogue on the Sabbath, and you with a withered hand, we're going to fix that here and now today. Jesus was picking a fight. So I think we as Christians have to be really savvy about when to pick fights and when to be as sly as serpents.
So in essence, it looks like maybe some of the governors of what would appear to be more heavy-handed action states are really just virtue signaling, and there's not a lot going on behind the scenes. Like people that want to make it work.
I haven't seen, you know, county health hasn't showed up here on Sunday morning to count heads.
Well, I just mean like people that want to make it work are going to make it work.
Yes.
And they're going to just work around whatever the government edict is at that point. Yeah. Okay, yes. That makes more sense.
Yep.
Okay, let's move to the next question. This one is from Gust. Hello, Paul. I hope you're doing well. My inquiry is pretty straightforward. What are the prerequisites for salvation? We know that if we should believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and put our trust in his finished work, we will be saved. What that means or what it should mean is not totally clear to a lot of us. You appear to have a more ecumenical bent than other evangelicals of your caliber. I don't know if this same ecumenism extends into matters of salvation or merely into dialogue. But I wanted to know if you believe that, say, denial of the deity of Christ is sufficient to damn/exclude someone from participation in the kingdom of God. Or tangentially, as someone that appreciates the Reformation fathers and their work very much, I wanted to know if you're of the opinion that to reject reformational doctrines of assurance may make a non-evangelical more likely to rely upon their own filthy rags in a way not conducive to peace with God. How important is it for us to hold the line on such essential truths as sola fide, as Protestants in the modern world, as we all deal jointly with the meaning crisis to varying degrees as brothers and sisters in Christ? Finally, to what extent should a Christian engage with non-Christian literature, and how should it be done? Many thanks.
I spent a good deal of time in our Wednesday night men's Zoom small group dealing with some of this. This is one of the most common questions I get asked. And the challenge is almost always with the fact that this is not pretty straightforward at all. Because if he were in, I don't know if he's in the room right now, because what I would do immediately is throw back at him the question, what do you mean by salvation? Because most of the time in the West, from the medieval period on forward, especially in a Reformation context, the assumption is that word means going to heaven when you die. And there's a reason that it got shaped in this way through church history and theological history in Europe. The question I think he really wants to ask is participation in the kingdom of God, ultimate participation. And when you use the word prerequisites, most people hear qualification. things I need to do. So there are qualifications for college admission. Things that tends to be the framework in which people look at this question. What's fascinated me for many decades is that if you read the New Testament carefully, and the Old, but if you read the New Testament carefully, they don't ask the question quite in the way we do. If you would look at, let's say, the man who comes to Jesus because his child is sick, and you'd ask, what must my daughter do to be saved? What on earth does saved mean in that sense? It means, well, to be healed from her disease. If there's a homeless person laying out in front of my office and you ask, what must that person do to be saved? The answer might be get sober. Because of the history of the church, especially in the West, and I think part of the reason the Orthodox are doing so well right now in the American context is that they aren't quite as hamstrung by this narrow definition of salvation as the church in the West has been. When Jesus saves the world, he's not just saving souls, he's saving the world. And it's very clear that the salvation that Jesus gives to me by grace started long before I was born. Not only in his work on the cross, but in his in the effects of his work all the way through history that leads all the way up to me. The salvation of Jesus Christ has come to me through the wisdom of my parents and the way that they raised me and treated me, and through the even through American founding fathers that consider them deists, and through scientists that may or may not have been Christians at all that have graced my culture with one thing or another. Philosophers who perhaps themselves rejected the church, but yet contributed to our thought and the goodness that is in our world right now. We so narrowly target this word salvation that we set up problems for ourselves that we can't answer. Now, the threat of the fear I have of talking so broadly is that then suddenly we exclude the narrowness, and Jesus doesn't do that either. You know, when the rich young ruler comes up to Jesus and basically asks, "What must I do to be saved?" Jesus doesn't say, well, wait a little while. I'm going to die on a cross, and then I'm going to rise from the dead. And then you really need to believe that I rose from the dead, and that'll do it. Jesus says, listen to Moses, do the law. All these things I've done. Okay, sell everything that you have and follow me. What kind of an answer is that? What kind of an answer was his first answer from a Protestant perspective? We need models and formulations to navigate this world. We're small-minded, simple creatures. But we always notice that these models have their limits, as every good model does. And so we should recognize when the models are at the end of their limits. We had a conversation in my small group on assurance of salvation. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means exactly what it says. It's assurance of salvation. Whether I feel like, and that's the salvation again, there is reduced, whether I feel like when I die, death will not separate me from Christ. In fact, my death will be a portal into greater communion with Christ than I am now enjoying. What kind of emotional confidence do I have that death will not separate me from Christ? Then people are almost always looking at that moment to their own performance. And as a Reformed minister, I say, that's a dumb thing to do. Don't look to your own performance. Look to Christ's performance and his love and his power. You know, if that's just Reformed Doctrine 101. So, first of all, salvation is of the Lord. Book of Jonah. Second, we are saved by grace through faith. What do we mean saved? Saved from everything. Saved, Christ works through many things to afford us our salvation. What do we mean by salvation? Well, I need to be saved from my stinking sins now. I need to be saved from my insecurities and doubts. I need to be saved from the ways that I fail to love my neighbor, all the way up to and including the people I share a home with, the people I share a church with, the people I share a block with, the people I share a city with. I need to be the thing I most often need to be saved from is me. I'm the source of my misery. I'm the source of my trouble. And it's my propensity to break the law of God, to violate his will, to not treat neighbors, to not love them as I love myself, on and on and on and on and on and on. I need to be saved from me more than I need to be saved from the devil. Although I need to be saved from him too. And I need to be saved from hell. And I need to be saved from flesh-eating bacteria. Jesus works through the doctors to help with that. I need to be saved from cholera. Jesus works through the sanitation workers to be for me to be saved from that. Now, we like to play a lot of games in the church, and we think we know what we're doing when we play these games. So then I like to play other games with those games, like, well, before the crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus, did Peter believe in the Lord Jesus Christ in a salvific way? Did Abraham? How about C.S. Lewis before his conversion? Was he saved? See, very quickly, the question of time and process and history come to play in that. And you're exactly right. When I have conversations with people, on one moment they might imagine themselves to be as reformed and as I am saved by the saving work of Jesus Christ. Oh, okay. But put them in a different situation and suddenly they're worried about their own moral performance. Okay, we should be worried about our own moral performance. That's something we have stewardship over. But where do we put our trust in? So, and then people want me to say, well, who's in and who's out? It's like, why are you tempting me? Why are you tempting me to act like God? Please don't tempt me to act like God. God is the judge. God saves. God redeems. God is in charge of history. I put my trust in him. He will do what's right. He will do what's right with me. He will do what's right with those I love who might be at this point far from Christ and his church. He will do what's right with those who say all kinds of blasphemous things about God and his son. He will do what's right. And so that's where I'm going to place my trust. So that sometimes makes me sound very broad. And so then people come up to questions like, well, why are you going to talk to those people over there who are enemies of Christ? I don't know. Jesus talked to the people who killed him. What's my marching orders? Does Jesus say, now look around and decide for yourself who's in and who's out, and treat people on the basis of whether or not you think they're in and out? Or did Jesus say, love your neighbor all the way up to and including your enemy? So how should I treat people? I should treat them the way Jesus tells me to treat them, with love. Well, what is love? Well, one way into this is treat them the way they'd like to be treated. Well, what if they don't treat you that way? Well, they're not Christians. Why should I expect them to? Why don't I expect them to cuss me out and treat me poorly? But they probably will. Does that mean my orders are different? No. So, no, it's not a straightforward question. Well, it is and it isn't. Prerequisites for salvation. The prerequisites for salvation are what God has done through Christ. Those are the prerequisites. And he's working that out through my life and through this world and through history. And I will trust him to do it better than I can imagine, even if I look around and think, boy, I'm worried. But no. So, and then if someone says, I want to enjoy union with Christ. Okay, good. I want that for you too. Go find his church. Be united with Christ through his church. Well, which church? Well, you're going to have to figure that out. I can give you some recommendations, but you're probably not going to listen to me anyway. So go be reconciled with Christ and be united with Christ by his church. Please, please, please do. Well, I don't want to do that. Okay, well, that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to ask the last question before I ask Alex's, kind of similar to what you were just talking about. It's from Controller 796. Pastor Paul, you are an inspiration to me in the sense that you can talk with a wide variety of people with as much variety of opinions. And I wanted to ask if you have any advice or techniques you would like to share for someone to be able to listen with sincerity and attention to someone with an opposite view without succumbing to an antagonistic scuffle or personal bias.
It's really hard. And I don't do it anywhere near as well as I should, or as often as I should. And I think there's a lot of training that is involved in it. If you really want to grow in it, be involved in a really horrible existential conflict and be forced into a situation where you recognize that you have absolutely no power to resolve it, but yet don't run away from it. You can do that in a relationship in a church, like a church fight. You can do that in a very difficult marriage. You can do that in a difficult relationship with a parent or a child or a neighbor. It means not no matter, because you have responsibilities to your personal health and to your mental health. You have all of those things too. So I'm not going to cast it in existential questions. But if you decide that you want to maintain good relationships with people who are different from you, just keep working at that. Now, part of what happens in that process is that sometimes you lose yourself. And so that's the trick. You have to both not lose yourself or your integrity and be in deep community with others who not only disagree with you, but anger you and you anger them. and don't leave. And along the way, what you'll have to do is get a handle on your own reactivity and learn to control it. I've watched therapists, really good therapists learn how to do this because, I had to get the cops and the fire department here for a homeless person earlier this week, and this particular homeless person cusses me out on a regular basis. Fuck you, Pastor Paul, fuck you, and just on and on and on and on. And he was doing that to me one day, and I also often loan this person money. And so and this person's not mentally stable, so he can turn on a dime. And so he was just cussing me out, and he's cussed me out so many times for so many years. I mean, it doesn't even trigger me internally much anymore. And so he's going through all the insults, but then I remembered that he owed me $40, and he's really good at paying his debts, and say, "Oh, by the way, you owe me $40." And do, "Fuck you, Pastor Paul." Oh, I do? Oh, I'm sorry. And he opened his wallet, gave me $40. "I'm really sorry, I forgot about that." Apologized profusely for forgetting to give me the $40 back. And then once that interchange was done, went back to verbally abusing me. And if you deal with people enough in situations like this enough, you begin to realize that a lot of the poor treatment you're receiving is only partly about you. It has everything to do with what's going on inside of them. And that will give you a certain amount of liberty to look beyond the insults. So then that person was sitting on the curb, and the police came, and I wondered how well this person would do with the police, because that's been difficult over the years. But thank you, Pastor Paul, for calling the police and getting them here, because it's not always easy to get the cops here to deal with homeless people. "Thank you, Pastor Paul, for getting the police here." And then they're talking to them. The cops are talking to him, and I'm just watching the cops talk to him and thinking, they're going to trigger him. And sure enough, the cop says something that I know will trigger him, and bang, it triggers him, and he starts, cussing. But there's 3 cops there, so he's not going to push it too far. And so, kind of back and forth and back and forth. And then the firefighters come, and they have to check him out medically. And then the firefighters kind of trigger him, and then he kind of pulls back. But I watched the police and the firefighters get triggered. And I thought, yeah, I understand. They're dealing with a tough population with difficult situations, and it's easy to get triggered. And so a lot of this is learning to know yourself well enough to not get triggered, and to work through it. And again, I've seen therapists do that, because gosh, it'd be really hard to be a therapist. You sit in a room, and you just, at some point, you've learned the person well enough, and you just watch them in these low agency spirals. I mean, it's sort of like an addiction. And I think Vervaeke really talks about that well, in terms of they've lost so much agency that they're just spinning in their own misery, and you would so love to release them from that misery, but you can't. And so, they're blaming other people, and they're doing all of these defense techniques to, not take responsibility for their own emotional work and all of this stuff. And so to be a therapist and to sit and to patiently kind of help people with that, and you see just these little glimpses of, they say the right thing, or they have the right thought, and it's sort of like 1 minute manager, where you pause and say, okay, they're doing the right thing, so I'm going to pause and encourage that little moment and try and build on it. And it can take years of working with a person to have them grow out of their self-defeating patterns and tendencies, and to actually make progress. But in order to do that, you can't get triggered, or you get sucked into the insanity. Mental illness isn't contagious, but insanity is. And so the way you grow in this is to be around difficult people and to love them. And this gets back to the salvation question. Well, how do you want to grow in your salvation? Well, do exactly what Jesus says. Love your neighbor. Well, what does that mean? Does it mean have warm feelings about them? Now, the feelings are rather incidental often to it. It means when they treat you badly, treat them with kindness. when they say unfair things about you and harm your reputation, don't return evil for evil. It's all of the things that Jesus says. And so this is the thing I really love about my friend Warren Mills's What's So Good About the Good News is that Warren rightly notes that the golden rule of loving other people, if you practice this, you will grow in sanctification yourself. And your capacity, it won't be reciprocal narrowing, it'll be reciprocal broadening. And you will be able to love people into new kinds of agency. That's exactly what Christ does. And he tells us exactly what he's doing, and he invites us into his method. Love your enemy. Do it. Well, I don't want to love my enemy because I don't have any confidence that if I give my enemy anything, that they won't abuse me. And Jesus is like, well, that's true. They might even kill you. They might hang you on a cross and mock you viciously and hunt down your followers. Yeah, they might do that, but love them still. But what about government? Yeah, this government. Yeah. I'm not taking away any of the complexity here, but that's the path. And so work the path and figure out what love requires. And loving a homeless person might require calling the police and having them thrown in jail. That's what love might require. It also might require, brushing off their spittle and showering off their stench and trying to keep the neighbor's dogs at bay. And that's what love requires. So you don't lose agency with love. It's reciprocal broadening. You gain it. So that's what you do. Love people.
Great.
All right, last question. Alexander's question.
Yes, Alexander. Alexander, do you want to ask it or do you want me to read it?
I can read it, sure. I was thinking about when you mentioned this cool guy, Blackmon. He sounds like a person of my taste. Anyway.
Oh, you'd love him. Everybody loves Tim. Oh, Tim's.
I never heard of him.
Obviously, not everybody loves Tim, but
yeah. So
he's a wonderful man.
You were mentioning you having a hard time modeling what was going on, and I've thought about that in our national Swedish politics, and I've heard some people talking about that. People are so afraid of doing the wrong thing, and no one is asking themselves, how do I do the right thing? And I'm thinking that maybe that's related here. That you said you had a hard time understanding why someone would want to take the actions that would get him kicked out. And I'm thinking, yeah, they'll hide behind all the safe space vocabulary and everything, but it's sort of like people maybe being too scared. So I'm thinking about, so your thoughts about the afraid of doing the wrong thing versus the wanting to do the right thing. And then also, how would someone who's trying to be a Christian person relate to these things?
I've never really seen that contrast set up that way. I'll have to think more about that. Yeah,
it's fine. We can. I've mentioned maybe we can take this like the next week or something.
Yeah.
If this is something that you might need to think on a bit, that's perfectly fine. I won't bother you for an ad hoc answer here.
Well, I think part of what it gets at is fear versus desire. So afraid to do that. Fear is important, but you got to watch it. Desire is important, but you got to watch it. Generally speaking, afraid to do the wrong thing isn't a good way to start. Wanting to do the right thing is a better way to start. So, yeah, I don't know if I have too much more than that.
Yeah, that sounds good at least. I'm thinking in our context here, we have this is sort of in the how our bureaucracy is done. Like if you're having one of these big bureaucracies like we do here, then the whole not doing the wrong thing is sort of how you do the right thing in a big bureaucracy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's true, especially in bureaucracies. And, again, in Tim's specific case, I've been around enough communities and organizations to know that ideas have a way of gaining traction and momentum and going places that often leads to bad outcomes. And so I have no idea why they fired Tim. To me, it was completely understandable that people wouldn't appreciate Tim's sense of humor, because his sense of humor is sometimes irreverent. But why they didn't want him there anymore, to the degree that they would go all the way to firing him? Wow. But hey, the cultures do that. Communities do that. But I think part of the problem of so much safetyism, as Jonathan Haidt calls it, part of the problem of all this safetyism is, I think, a deep-seated idolatry that imagines we can secure this world for ourselves. And that's such a bad way to proceed. You don't how we very seldom find Jesus playing it safe. And when Jesus invites Peter to walk on the water, no, walking on water isn't safe. We should trust and believe and pursue. And I like C.S. Lewis's answer that it's not that we want to, it's the truth. Our real problem is that we want too little. We sell out too quickly. So we sell out for safety instead of embracing everything that God wants for us. So, and Tim's very much that way. Tim's a go after it kind of guy. So anyway, all right. I think we're done with the Q&A. I'm looking at Rick now. Are we? So thank you all for coming here today, and I'll stay on a little bit after, and we can have the post-recording chat. And but yeah, thank you all for coming, and thanks for the great questions this week. I hope I was in some ways helpful.